Hi, I'm Alta. I'm a senior at Thayer Academy. I'm going to be talking about electric buses. So around 26 million kids in the US take a bus to school every day. I'm sure some people in the audience here are some of them. The benefits of school buses cannot really be overstated. They reduce traffic because less parents are on the roads trying to get their kids to school. They reduce tardiness, and actually they're statistically safer for kids because they get into less road accidents. They make school more accessible for low-income families with limited transportation options and long commutes. And they're actually a really great way for young kids to learn how to socialize for the first time. Now, I have spent so much time on school buses. And actually, we're going to do some math here real quick. I was in public school for 3 years. In the Massachusetts public school system, they want the schools to schedule in 185 days into every school year. So we're going to start there and maybe subtract a few days because we used to have snow days. That was a thing that once happened. So we'll start there. And then let's just assume that my commute was around maybe 15 minutes. So that was about how much time that I spent riding a bus to school when I was in public schools. I also took the bus to Thayer for 2 years. During that time, Thayer runs for about 8 full months a year, and about 20 days per month. Let's say my commute was around 25 minutes. So it's another 8,000 minutes we're adding to it. And during that time, I was also taking the bus home 3 days a week. So we'll do that same math, but trade out 20 days for about 12 days per month. I was also taking the bus to camp. So for 1 year, I took the bus to camp, about a 30-minute drive. I was taking it for 9 weeks, 5 days per week. 2 more years, I took the bus, but I took it both ways. So again, 5 days per week, 9 weeks, but a 60-minute drive instead. So basically, when we add all of this up, I have spent around 27,000 minutes on a bus. Now that's a really large number and kind of hard to quantify in your brain. So I did some more math to make it easier. So basically, I have spent around 19.25 full 24-hour days of my life on a school bus. And that is actually significantly lower than the average public school student. So I did that math as well. So let's say a public school student starts in kindergarten and goes all the way through senior year. That's about 13 years. And again, we'll take the 182 days from before, and then assume that maybe their average commute is around 30 minutes, and they take the bus both ways. So when we do that, that is almost 142,000 minutes on a bus, or 99.27 days. That is an insane amount of time. So clearly, school buses are very important. We rely on them heavily, and so many people would not be able to get to school without them. So it should horrify all of you when I tell you that they are actively poisoning us. Of the 5,000 buses currently running in the US, around 95% of them run on diesel fuel. When diesel fuel is burned, it releases diesel exhaust, which is a known carcinogen, or cancer-causing agent. It was classified as a carcinogen by the World Health Organization in 2012, and for the 30 years before that was considered a possible carcinogen. So this is not new information. Since 2012, which has been about 14 years since then, so that's most of my life, it's been linked to both lung cancer and bladder cancer. And yet we're still taking these buses. And not only is it linked to cancer, but it's linked to asthma and other physical and cognitive issues. There's actually a measurable detrimental impact to student performance in schools. So the entire 19.25 days that I was sitting on a bus, I was breathing in toxic fumes. For the average high school student, the average public school student, by the time they are 18, has spent around 99.27 days breathing in fumes that are possibly going to give them cancer. So maybe when we talk about curing cancer, we should first start by not giving it to people in the first place. That is where battery electric buses, or BEVs, come in. BEVs are powered by lithium-ion batteries, like many of the electric vehicles we see on the road currently. They are significantly safer for humans because they eliminate any direct contact with exhaust, and they actually have a much lower lifetime CO2 emissions, making them much better for the environment. They also have other benefits, like they're a lot quieter, so they lower urban noise pollution. And they actually, interestingly enough, can act as backup batteries in emergencies. So in case there's a power outage, you have a bus there that's like a giant battery. Now, the transition to BEVs has already started. In America currently, there are around 5,100 actively running buses spread across 49 states. Massachusetts has 633 of them. Boston, Lawrence, and Worcester are 3 examples of districts that are already refitting their buses to run on batteries. And over 20 others have received grants, either from the government or outside sources, to begin this transition on their own. And it's not just school buses, it's not just schools either. In 2022, the MBTA was ordered to refit their entire bus system by 2040, making the entire thing electric. But this transition is not easy. Electric buses have a very high upfront cost. So for many communities, it's just not plausible for them. It's not financially viable for them to put in this money when they have other things that they need now. And even if they did have the money, a lot of these communities just simply don't have the infrastructure necessary, like the charging ports necessary for these buses to safely make their commutes. And some people question our power grid's capacity to simply handle this new stress. But if we really began this transition on a much larger scale, we'd find that the benefits of electric buses far outweigh the negatives. So despite having a much higher upfront cost, they have significantly lower fuel costs over their lifetime, and they also have less components, so they break less often, meaning they have lower maintenance costs. And all of this leads to them having an overall lower cost than diesel buses. They also, interestingly, again, another interesting thing, not necessarily related to cost, but they can lower the price of energy by charging when energy prices are low and storing it until they're higher. So how do we begin? Well, in order for any large transition to happen, we're going to need government support. This money doesn't just come from anywhere, and school districts are going to need grants. We need local, state, and federal governments to prioritize the safety of their most vulnerable citizens in the most vital developmental parts of their lives. And it is our job as citizens of this country to push our governments to do that. So we can do things like lobbying with government officials, going to city council meetings or town council meetings, or even giving a speech at those meetings. We can also reach out to our officials directly, maybe by writing them an email or even writing a letter with Austin outside later. We can also talk to our schools, the schools that maybe don't own their own buses and instead work with outside companies, to have them open up that discussion with those companies and start pushing for those companies to transition their own fleets, changing the buses that we, as in this audience, are riding to school and making it safer for us. We can make the world a safer place. And it begins right here, right now, with electric buses. Also, this dashboard right here, this is a screenshot of a dashboard I found if anyone is interested in looking at the current state of electric buses in the US. So we have different, the headlines over here, you can look at the different prices, the funding opportunities, different states, different towns. And so if anyone would like to look at this on their own, I have the link on my slide, which will be sent out to everyone. So, thank you.